Hey everybody, I'm Joe, and I'm here today to talk about something that's been discussed in the last couple of days. I'm sure some of you have heard by now. Doctor Strange 2 went through some recent changes. Doctor Strange 2 is supposed to be one of the next upcoming installments in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Scott Derrickson, who did the first one, was supposed to do this one, but due to creative differences, he dropped out of the project. But as of right now, there were some recent developments that came out saying that Sam Raimi, the director of the original Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire, is in talks to direct the sequel. From what I can tell, he's pretty much locked into this deal, and I think it's very likely that this is going to happen. And part of me, as a Marvel fan in general, that just makes me really excited to see what he could bring to the table. And I think that it's a perfect opportunity for him to put his stamp on another superhero movie, because he hasn't done a superhero movie since 2007 with Spider-Man 3. And apparently this film is supposed to have horror elements, and Sam Raimi is known for doing horror films like the Evil Dead trilogy, and he has little bits of it in the Spider-Man movies, and some of his other films have that too. But Doctor Strange, with the parallel dimensions like Dormammu and every other villain that he could come into contact with, it seems like it would be an appropriate fit for him. For those of you who are new to my channel, I love the first two Spider-Man movies. I'm just gonna say that they're probably my all-time favorite movies. When I think of Spider-Man, that's what comes to my mind. I mean, there's other versions of the character that I do like. The 90s show, the Spectacular Spider-Man, the Spider-Man PS4 game, various comics that I've read, like the 60s comics, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. That's what got me into the character. And if you haven't seen my reviews of the movies, well, it's on my channel. You're more than welcome to watch them. Now, the title for Doctor Strange 2 is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what it is. Now, people have been wondering for a while what Marvel's gonna do now that the Infinity Saga's out of the way, and I was wondering that myself too. Could they go the cosmic route, the intergalactic route? They've kind of done that with the Guardians of the Galaxy, or maybe the Fantastic Four, because eventually the Fantastic Four has to show up, but I don't see that happening for quite a while. There's also the Disney Plus shows that they're doing, Falcon and Winter Soldier, WandaVision and Loki. Marvel's not going away anytime soon, but the big question a lot of people had was, what's the biggest selling point that Marvel's gonna have in the up and coming phases? And apparently from what they've said, and it was touched on in Doctor Strange, the first one, was the multiverse. Now, I'm not an avid comic book reader, but to my knowledge, the multiverse is various parallel dimensions that the characters have experienced, like seeing themselves in an alternate reality, or like what they're like on this version of the Earth, or what certain people are like on that other version of Earth. And DC Comics have done that too, like Earth 1, Earth 2, and so on and so forth. The main continuity from the Marvel Comics, like Spider-Man for instance, is Marvel 616. Then there's the Ultimate Spider-Man, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Man 2099. The list is endless, really. And we've seen that in various comics. The Spider-Verse storyline, which was adapted into an animated film not that long ago, already getting audiences into the idea of seeing multiple Spider-Men. And it was a fun movie that really understood the heart of Spider-Man. What I'm trying to get at is that since Sam Raimi is doing Doctor Strange 2, well, at least is in talks to do it, a lot of people are wondering, since this is touching on the multiverse, what could this possibly mean now that Sam Raimi is doing it? Because I'm sure a lot of you know, Doctor Strange was referenced in Spider-Man 2.
Doctor Strange.
That's pretty good. But it's taken.
At the time, it was seen as like a fun little reference or a nod to other comic book characters, and Sam Raimi is a fan of the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko era of Marvel Comics, including Spider-Man. Now that he's in talks to direct this movie, it almost seems very prophetic in some ways, and it leads a lot of people to wonder, could this mean that Tobey Maguire could show up in some shape or form in the Doctor Strange sequel?
Don't give me hope.
There's other little hints that are showing up in the last couple of years or so, like the Morbius trailer that came out recently. Michael Keaton shows up at the end of the trailer supposedly as Adrian Toomes. I'm not really sure how it's connected, but there's one shot, I think it's Jared Leto walking down this alleyway, and you see a spray painting of Spider-Man on the wall and it says murderer. But look really closely, that's not the Tom Holland Spider-Man, it's the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man suit. And spoilers for Spider-Man Far From Home, J.K. Simmons shows up as J. Jonah Jameson, not the one that we remember from the Tobey Maguire series, but as a slightly different interpretation. And people have also pointed out that when they asked that if Tobey Maguire was going to show up as his own version of the character, and Tom Holland seemingly tries so hard to not say anything or try to contain some excitement. And then there's another interview that's out there on the web where Amy Pascal's talking about the possibility of that, and Kevin Feige's like trying to keep a straight face, and apparently he knows something that he shouldn't be saying, but he's not saying it anyway. Other people have talked about this extensively. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I'm trying to take this all with a grain of salt, as I think a lot of people should. But I also think that we need to keep in mind that, 20 years ago, we didn't think an Avengers movie was possible. But now, here we are, post-Endgame, anything could happen. Could Tobey Maguire possibly show up, reprising his role and giving his character a proper send-off? Or could there just be like a cameo, like what the Arrowverse did for Michael Keaton's Batman recently on the Infinite Earth Crisis thing or whatever that is? I really don't know what's going on here. A part of me feels like they're just screwing with us, but another part of me feels like, but are they, well, maybe? Maybe not. Or maybe they are. Now let's just think about it for a second on the possibility that he could come back. I think that this would be a perfect opportunity for Tobey Maguire to reach another level of stardom again like he did in 2002 with Spider-Man. Those of you who have watched me for a while, Tobey Maguire is my all-time favorite actor. I've been a fan of this guy ever since I was 12 years old. Not just as Spider-Man, but Seabiscuit, Great Gatsby, Cider House Rules, Brothers, Pawn Sacrifice, Pleasantville, and I think he's a way better actor than he gets credit for. There's other reasons that people have for hating Tobey Maguire, which hating celebrities today is not really that much of a surprise, but a lot of excuses that people have for not liking Tobey Maguire or thinking that he's not a good actor. Whenever I throw out the question of, okay, give me a reason why you don't think Tobey Maguire's that good, inevitably the Emo Peter sequence comes up. Alright guys, we get it. The Emo Peter scenes, we've heard it all before. Oh, it's dumb. It's really dumb. But I've seen a lot worse things in movies, believe me. Tobey Maguire was just doing what he was told to do. He had to follow the script and direction that he was given. I've talked about all that in my Spider-Man reviews, so you can go watch them if you want to know my full thoughts. Tobey Maguire is not to blame for the way Spider-Man 3 turned out. It was Sony's interference. They wanted Sam Raimi to put Venom in the movie. He didn't want to, but Avi Arad forced him to do it because fans wanted to see Venom. And plus, the writers were trying to figure out how do we continue the story from Spider-Man 2. Sam Raimi wanted to do Sandman and continue Harry's arc, which I think would have been a good movie, but there were so many hands in the cookie jar that everything just got lost in the shuffle and people were desperately trying to figure out how do we connect the dots to each other. Again, watch my review of Spider-Man 3, but it's really Sony that's to blame for this. Not Sam Raimi, and certainly not Tobey Maguire. And there's other reasons why Tobey Maguire gets a lot of hate. Perhaps you've heard of the movie Molly's Game. It's based on the true story of this woman named Molly Bloom, who was a poker princess of sorts. She was involved in all these underground poker tournaments in the early 2000s or late 90s or something like that. Apparently she had an encounter with Tobey Maguire, who was involved in this high-stakes poker game. Now she wrote a book about her life story that included Tobey Maguire's encounters with her being a large portion of the book, and they also show it in the movie. Tobey's not mentioned by name specifically. He's played by Michael Cera, who's named Player X, but a lot of his behavior and actions in the movie apparently are a reflection of what she remembers Tobey Maguire doing and saying to her during these tournaments. According to Molly Bloom at least, he apparently stole the game from Molly, which caused her to move to New York City, and the one thing that people keep talking about, he told her apparently to bark like a seal for a $1,000 poker chip. And now, ever since that book came out, which made God knows how much money, and it was later adapted into a movie, people naturally wanted to know, who was that guy that she was talking about? And it turned out it was Tobey Maguire, who's famous for playing Spider-Man. So he wasn't exactly the good, squeaky clean guy that we all thought he was, at least according to the narrative of society. Now, ever since then, he's gone completely under the radar in more ways than one. He was the narrator for the animated film Boss Baby. Yes, I actually sat down and watched that movie. Really bad movie, but not the atrocity that I feared it would be. He's also gone to the role of being a producer lately. And he's supposedly directing a movie called Blood on Snow or whatever it is. I don't know. But ever since the book and movie about Molly Bloom, Tobey Maguire in more ways than one has gone completely under the radar. And other people like Charlize Theron have said that he was difficult to work with on a movie like Cider House Rules. Yet she said something similar about Tom Hardy during Mad Max Fury Road. Now, I don't like to talk about stuff like this, like celebrity drama, now what she said or did, or what he said or did. People act like Tobey Maguire's the spawn of Satan because of this. If that's the case, yeah, that's a pretty low thing to do. But there's plenty of celebrities out there who have said and done far worse than that. Mel Gibson has been blacklisted for a long time for all the racial remarks he said to his now ex-wife over the phone. Michael Richards, Kramer from Seinfeld, calling people the N-word in a comedy club. Chris Brown literally beat the hell out of Rihanna. Everybody knows that. It was apparently all released on tape. NFL quarterback Michael Vick was involved in dogfighting. Now, whether or not he actually actively participated in that willingly, that's another debate, but he was still involved in that stuff. Robert Downey Jr. was a drug addict for years, and I mean years. Now people have so much love and respect for the guy because Iron Man shot him back onto the top. And he even begged the world to forgive Mel Gibson for what he said, saying like, look, if you guys are willing to give me a second chance, why not do the same thing for Mel Gibson? He's been through enough. My point is, just because someone is a celebrity doesn't mean that they can't make any mistakes. They're human beings, just like the rest of us. We all mess up, we all say and do stupid things. We all do things that we shouldn't do. Tobey Maguire telling Molly Bloom to bark like a seal? How exactly does that equate to a person walking into a room with a loaded gun and shooting people? As far as we know, he's not killing anybody. He's not a child molester. He's not a rapist. Now, could you argue that he's not exactly a nice guy? Well, that's another topic, and I've heard both sides of the argument on that. I don't know him. I've never met him. I can't say for sure. But from what I hear, he's actually a really nice guy. He just doesn't like all the attention that comes with being a celebrity. And he's not really the typical actor that we see in Hollywood that's very flashy and look at me, I'm an actor. I'm so more talented than you are. He's not on the same level as his buddy Leonardo DiCaprio or Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans. He's very much like a normal kind of guy who's trying to make his way in the acting business. And he did make a name for himself for a while. On top of that, he just went through a divorce not that long ago. So he's probably trying to work out some issues on trying to co-parent his kids with his now ex-wife. There's probably a whole lot of factors to consider on this, but just because he said or did something stupid, I don't think we should throw out the baby with the bathwater and never give him a second chance. We're all human beings. We all say and do stupid stuff. And I'm not condoning for a second what he said or did. And I don't think any smart person would either. But I think we should be more willing to give him another chance and explain his side of the story, if he's willing to. Now, I don't want to speak for the guy. I can't say for sure what's going on in his head because he probably heard a lot of that stuff that came out about him. But if I were him, I would be really embarrassed about it. If he were to do another big movie, that's probably a lot of what people would want to talk about. Everybody wants to know about the saucy stuff. They don't want to hear like, oh, what movie are you doing next? Or, hey, you got any plans for the future? They all want to know, hey, what was all that about with so-and-so? People did that with Mel Gibson when he did Edge of Darkness, and he was not interested in that. And I'm sure Michael Vick to this day still gets questions about the dogfighting thing, which...
I think it's time to move on, don't you?
But again, I think another reason Tobey probably doesn't want to talk about that stuff, or maybe even try to apologize for his actions, because he would probably think, what good would it even do? People would still hate me for it. Again, I don't want to speak for the guy, but that's probably what he's thinking. And Mel Gibson didn't exactly make a public apology for saying those anti-Semitic and racist remarks because he knew, what good would it do? People would still hate me for it anyway. And unfortunately, there's people out there that still do. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but what I'm trying to say is, I think Tobey Maguire deserves another chance. And I think him showing up as his interpretation of the character that we saw all those years ago, I think that this would give him a big resurgence and get the general public back on his side. Now, whether or not he wants to do that, well, I'll leave that up to him. But he has publicly said in an interview not that long ago that if he feels called to do something, he'll go for it. He doesn't feel restricted to one genre or the other. If he feels called to something, he'll do it. Could he be secretly meeting with Marvel and Sam Raimi to show up in Doctor Strange 2? Maybe? Or could they be planning that later on, after Doctor Strange 2? Possibly? Does Tom Holland know something that we don't know? Does he know that they're talking to Tobey Maguire about that? They might be. I don't know. Again, take all this with a grain of salt here, but with Marvel's continued success over the last decade or so, there's no reason why they can't get stuff like this to happen. With the multiverse they have planned, who knows what they're going to do with it? There's all kinds of possibilities here, and fans have been wanting to see a proper send-off for Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker ever since Spider-Man 4 was canceled. And Maguire has said that he was willing to do Spider-Man 4, even after the mixed response of Spider-Man 3. Say what you will about Spider-Man 3, but it was financially successful. Now, you guys know my opinion on Tobey Maguire as an actor, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much, but if you don't think he's a great actor, watch him in movies like Cider House Rules, Seabiscuit, Pawn Sacrifice, or even Brothers. He is fantastic in that movie, and those others that I mentioned. My opinion of him as a person, from what I can tell, I don't think he's a bad person. I've seen a lot worse celebrities out there. Not a perfect person, but let's be honest. Except for Jesus, nobody in this world is perfect. Nobody. Tobey Maguire's no exception. Everybody deserves a second chance. If we could give that to Robert Downey Jr., If we can give a second chance to Michael Vick or to Mel Gibson to some degree, or heck, if people still like Michael Jackson's music despite all the accusations that came out against him, whether or not he did do any of the stuff that they've accused him of doing, I'm not going to get into that. But if you're willing to look past him possibly being a child molester, I don't want to get too deep into that, but you probably get what I'm saying here. No human in this world is perfect. Nobody.
Well, give me another chance.
And whether or not he does show up as Spider-Man again, we'll see what happens, but I believe that one day he can make a big comeback. Doctor Strange 2, if he's willing to come back, I think that this would be a perfect opportunity. And it would give many fans out there, this guy included, something to talk about and reminisce about for years to come. I think it's really exciting that as of right now, Sam Raimi's in talks to direct Doctor Strange 2 and how it could possibly tie in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man into the MCU. I'm really crossing my fingers that maybe it could happen, but I'm also keeping my expectations low because they might not do that. But you never know. We all thought that we'd never see Spider-Man in the MCU because of the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. Well, look how that turned out. Comic book movies have become so prevalent now that I think it's inevitable that we're going to get some kind of a crossover. Next thing you know, we're going to get a DC Marvel crossover and just make the fans go. So those are my thoughts on Doctor Strange, Sam Raimi, and Tobey Maguire. I saw it as a good opportunity to get my thoughts out on this topic. So what are your guys' thoughts on this situation? Comment below and tell me your thoughts, and I'll see you all very soon.